Sepsis kills 11 million people globally each year. With its long hospital and intensive care stays, sepsis imposes a costly burden. Our device is a handheld breath analyzer that is designed to help avoid many of these deaths by measuring lactate in breath. Lactate is an important prognostic marker in managing sepsis. Lactate levels are already checked with a blood sample only once the patient arrives at the hospital. This is slow and painful. Delays in sepsis management translate to worse patient outcomes, especially in patients with raised lactate. We can improve this. Our device requires patients to breathe into a handheld analyzer, which then produces lactate results within seconds. Measuring breath means our device is non-invasive and easy to use. The data we have suggests that a pre-hospital lactate produces shorter hospital stays, shorter intensive care stays, and better patient outcomes. Our device will enable non-invasive pre-hospital testing, whilst current devices are invasive or rely on hospital infrastructure. Our goal is to measure lactate in the patient's breath and identify very sick patients before they even reach the hospital. This means quicker treatment and better outcomes, saving lives and money. We have published promising data on our ability to measure lactate in breath. We now need £1 million to carry out a clinical trial and invest in product development. Lactate detection is just the beginning of our device. We plan to measure different markers in breath for disease and well-being. Thank you for listening. My name is Mikail Atkas, and I hope you can join us on this journey to improve healthcare.
So you mentioned you're going to entry this journey pre-hospital. So where are you going to get the patients? How are you going to identify the patients and who are you going to sell it to?
Mm-hmm. So our first target is to have paramedics using this device. Mm-hmm. So when they go in the ambulance to assess the patients, it will be part of their triaging assessment. So as well as a blood pressure, heart rate, they will also check a lactate. And then that will tell them how sick a patient is. Our initial target are patients with fevers, because this is the easiest way to identify an infection.
Still in hospital, right?
No, this is in the community. Okay. So when the patient is called for an ambulance and the paramedics turn up, they'll take a blood pressure and heart rate usually. On top of that, we suggest they take a lactate reading as well.
Have you thought about more upstream a way to get access to the patients, like self-tests, things like that? Is it that easy to use for like patient without medical knowledge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easy for anyone to use. All it requires is to be able to breathe into a handheld analyzer. But we haven't gone for that route to begin with because we believe marketing it as a medical device will allow us a higher pricing point following clinical trials that demonstrate an amount of savings that is an amount of value that is saved for hospitals.
But it also reduces access, right?
It also reduces what?
Reduces access to patients. If you sell to customer to patient, they are much larger base, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're selling, I think it's kind of like, you call it pre-hospital setting, but it's more like close to hospital setting. Mm-hmm. Like your targets, it's more like paramedics, like the limited resources for staff, right? Mm-hmm. So that means your market is smaller. You know, who can use it. Yeah. Have you thought about like how big is your market? Maybe just a suggestion, maybe move it to the customer side a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, patient side, I mean.
Yeah, so already 130 million patients attend A&E or emergency departments in the US. 5% of those patients have a lactate reading, but 10% of those patients will have a blood gas analysis that will include lactate reading. As a clinician who's worked in the hospital, I rarely feel comfortable seeing any patient that comes through the door without a lactate reading, especially if I'm considering sepsis. So there's still the market base or the target market is still in the tens of millions that we intend to go for. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks.
Sepsis is an area which, let's say, the world's been talking about changing the clinical approach for decades. But the clinical approach is get somebody in, think they've got sepsis, whack in every single antibiotic available. I'm sure you know this. Have you got a potentially kind of KOL plan as part of your development, part of your business plan to help guide that change in kind of clinical approach? So get a number of KOLs on board early on.
Sorry, what do you mean by KOL?
Key opinion leaders, so
Okay.
medical experts who will help guide and distribute the message that actually this is an approach which has real value and could change the sepsis treatment approach.
So we are working with some consultants that are part of the wider Imperial College environment. And so they would be our first kind of leads that we'd want to champion our device once clinical trials are finished. And they are leaders in their respective environments. So that's either anesthetics is our biggest kind of support we have at the moment.
And then you talk about a kind of next stage of different products. How, again, what's your planning in terms of ultimately your intended use in your submission, which will then allow you to roll out other things on top of your original kind of lactate product?
So for the lactate detection device, that is specifically, we're planning for that to be a medical device that will likely be a class 2B in the FDA guidelines. So we would want to market that with a PMA initially, because that will allow us to get a higher pricing point. And then we'd want to sell that separately as a medical device that measures lactate in breath. And then the other products that we are planning or that we are developing would look at different biomarkers that wouldn't necessarily need to be sold or marketed as medical devices.
Try and find yourself a 510K. You don't want to do a PMA.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the advice.
But no.